Alright, so I decided to talk about the minimum wage, and which is a little bit controversial because a lot of people our age and college students tend to work for minimum wage most of the time. And I wanted to talk about how it affects our businesses, how it affects the working and middle class, and how it affects consumers that make over minimum wage. I actually oppose raising the federal minimum wage for a couple different reasons. One, because I feel like the minimum wage should be focused on more of a local level, because cost of living, say here in Southeast Missouri, is totally different than cost of living in California or larger cities. I went ahead and got some resources, and I'll just name those off real fast. Some of the resources I got was pretty reliable. I got some resources from Purdue, the Congressional Budget Office, and a couple non-for-profit employment policy institutes. For many Americans, for many American workers, minimum wage employment was for temporary employees. It was for teenage workers. It was for bus boys or people making phone calls, and to get them through school so that they could have a higher education and so that they could make more money. So it gave, minimum wage in a roundabout way gave incentive for people to pursue an education or to pursue a better job so that they could go out and make more money. A couple things that minimum wage does, some of the cons, a couple things that it does is it puts a burden on the middle class and puts a burden on the working class. So I want to give two examples. So like, if you work for minimum wage and you work, let's say you work at Town and Country. Let's say you work at Town and Country for minimum wage. Minimum wage goes up to, the federal minimum wage is wanting to go up to $10.10. Fast food restaurants are wanting to go up to $15. I oppose both of those. Let's say that the Town and Country minimum wage you have to pay $10.10. Who's making $7.50 or $8 an hour. So that means that the consumer is going to eat that cost because, let's use an example as bread. You go in, you buy a loaf of bread for $1.99. Once minimum wage goes up, Town and Country is going to pass it on to consumers because bread's going to go from $1.99 to $2, or to $2.99, or $3.50, or whatever the case may be. So the only real person that benefits from the minimum wage going up is the person working at Town and Country that's probably going to school or probably trying to better themselves. The people that do not benefit from that is the single fathers, or the people that are working in the factories, the people that are that have went out and worked hard to get a good education and that's making $12, $13, $14 an hour. For this area, I'm using this area as an example. So the effect of minimum wage whenever it comes to the middle class and the working class is negative. And like I said, the consumer pays that cost because the employer won't pick it up. The employer's not going to eat that cost. Another example is the ambulance district. I make $10 an hour on the ambulance. I work 72 hours a week. We show a profit of $50,000 a year. That's all we show. Our salary is $1.2 million in all of our employees. If minimum wage was to go up to $15 an hour, that means our salaries that we would pay out would be nearly $2 million. That means we would be $900,000 in the negative. There's no way that we could financially support an ambulance service to provide for the citizens in this area. Some other statistics that I found: people that are on minimum wage typically live in poverty. 21 million Americans live in poverty in the United States. Raising minimum wage would only affect 4% of that. Raising minimum wage would also increase the amount of jobs people hiring because they could hire less employees. So by raising minimum wage, on this study that I had found, the Congressional Budget Office study, it would decrease the amount of jobs by 500,000 in the United States, which is pretty significant. A lot of people would be out of work if minimum wage went up. So price increases for minimum wage, fewer hirings, and potentially layoffs if minimum wage goes up. If you have 20 employees paying them at $8 an hour, or whatever the case may be, you have 10 of those employees are paying at $8 an hour, and minimum wage was to go up to 15, that would put put you in a financial burden, and you might have to let some of those employees go. So to sum it all up, in conclusion, I feel like that minimum wage only would hurt the working class and hurt those that went out and worked hard to get a good education, to get a good job, because they don't benefit from minimum wage going up, which is the majority of Americans. Over 70% of Americans, have went out and make well above minimum wage, and they're going to eat that cost. It's an acute effect on Americans that are making the minimum wage, but those that are making a decent living and have went out and tried to make a good living, they don't see any effect from it at all. And that's pretty much it. That's all I got. Thanks.
Questions?
As you said, that the wage raises, the life expenses raises well. Do you think it is easier for the government to watch the products that sells for the consumers' prices?
Thank you for your question. Let me get this straight. Do you think it's easier for the government to step in and say you can't raise the price of the product? It would be easy for the government to do that. However, if the government did that, then the business eats the cost of the minimum wage. And if the business eats the cost of the minimum wage, the potential that the business could go out of business is significantly greater. Go ahead.
Businesses always, they put the prices and their profits, how they profit, and they usually make 100% profit.
Mm-hmm.
So, the wage rises, the business would not be affected by those rises. So, the government can watch them and make them just put the prices at the same prices and not raise it because they will not lose and get out of business.
Right, they can do that. Thank you for your question. Well, I'll just use this. If I owned a business and minimum wage went up to $15 an hour, and I was selling bread for $1 a loaf, and the government wouldn't let me raise it to $1.50 a loaf to compensate for that $15 an hour, and I couldn't pay myself what I needed to pay myself or expand my business, I probably wouldn't have a business. So therefore, several jobs in the United States, this is just a United States thing, would probably go out of business. Not necessarily go out of business, but cut back. They would cut back with employees because the person owning the business is not going to eat the cost. The consumer is going to eat the cost. It's a way of getting around social welfare in my mind. You raise the minimum wage, you have, instead of going out and giving out welfare checks or helping with welfare, you know what I mean? And which is I'm all for helping people. You've kind of went around that and just, instead of raising taxes to increase social welfare, you have raised minimum wage, so the middle class and working class is eating that cost. You understand what I'm saying?
Yep, time's up. Sorry.
I can debate it all day.
I know.
I can debate it all day.